The Watcher by David Eden. Chapter 1, New Beginnings. The moving truck pulled away from 657 Boulevard, leaving tire tracks in the fresh snow as Sarah Chen stood on the front steps of her new home. The Victorian house loomed before her, its dark shutters and wraparound porch promising the kind of suburban tranquility she dreamed of since her divorce. After months of apartment hunting in the city, this felt like a fresh start. "Mom, this place is huge," her 10-year-old daughter Emma called from somewhere inside, her voice echoing through empty rooms. Sarah smiled, pulling her coat tighter against the December chill. The neighborhood was perfect. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained lawns, and the kind of community where children could still ride bikes without fear. The realtor had mentioned the house had been on the market for over a year, which explained the reasonable price. Previous owners had moved suddenly, she'd said, but didn't elaborate. As Sarah began unloading boxes from her car, she noticed an elderly woman watching from the house across the street. The woman stood motionless behind her front window, partially obscured by lace curtains. When Sarah waved, the figure disappeared. "Friendly neighborhood," Sarah muttered, but brushed off the encounter. Moving was stressful for everyone, and she was determined to make this work. The first week passed in a blur of unpacking and settling in. Emma adjusted quickly to her new school, making friends with the girl next door, and Sarah found comfort in the routine of organizing their new life. The house itself was beautiful. Hardwood floors, original crown molding, and a fireplace that made the living room feel warm and inviting. It was on the 8th day that the first letter arrived. Sarah found it slipped under her front door when she returned from dropping Emma at school. No postmark, no return address, just her name written in careful block letters across cream-colored paper. Inside, the message was brief but unsettling. "Welcome to the neighborhood. I have been watching the house, and I am pleased to see it occupied again. I have been watching your family. You picked a good house. I have been watching it for decades. The children are beautiful. I look forward to getting to know you better." It was unsigned. Sarah read the letter 3 times, her coffee growing cold in her hands. The words felt invasive, too intimate for a neighbor's greeting. She thought about the woman she'd seen watching from across the street, but this didn't feel like the work of a curious elderly neighbor. There was something deliberate about the phrasing, something that made her skin crawl. She checked the locks on all the doors and windows, then called the non-emergency police line. The officer who answered was polite but unhelpful. "Probably just someone being friendly," he said. "Sometimes the older folks in these neighborhoods get a bit enthusiastic about new residents. Unless there's a direct threat, there's not much we can do." Sarah hung up, feeling frustrated. She considered calling her ex-husband, but their relationship was strained enough without her sounding paranoid about their new home. Instead, she tucked the letter into her desk drawer and tried to focus on the positive aspects of their move. That evening, as she tucked Emma into bed, her daughter mentioned something that made Sarah's stomach tighten. "Mom, there was a man watching me at the bus stop today." "What kind of man, sweetheart?" "I don't know. He was in a car across the street. He didn't get out or anything, but he was looking at me and the other kids." Sarah forced her voice to remain calm. "Did you recognize him? Was he someone's parent?" Emma shook her head. "I've never seen him before. He had dark hair and was wearing sunglasses." After Emma fell asleep, Sarah stood at her bedroom window, peering through the blinds at the quiet street below. Nothing moved, except the bare branches of oak trees swaying in the winter wind. But somewhere in the darkness, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching back. Chapter 2, Familiar Faces. The second letter arrived 3 days later, this time tucked under Sarah's windshield wiper, while her car sat in the grocery store parking lot. She didn't notice it until she'd loaded her groceries and was about to drive home. The familiar cream-colored paper made her hands shake as she opened it in broad daylight, surrounded by other shoppers going about their mundane Saturday errands. "I see you received my first letter. I hope you weren't alarmed. I mean no harm to you or your beautiful daughter Emma. I simply want you to know that I am always here, always watching over the house. Your daughter looks lovely in her blue winter coat. She walks to school so confidently for such a young girl. Tell me, Does she always take the same route? Children should be more careful about their routines. Sarah's vision blurred as she read the words again. This person knew Emma's name, knew what she wore to school, had been watching her daughter walk alone through the neighborhood. She fumbled for her phone and called Emma's school, her voice barely steady as she spoke to the secretary. "This is Sarah Chen, Emma's mother. I need to know if she arrived safely this morning." "Of course, Mrs. Chen. Emma's in class right now. Is everything all right?" Yes. I'll be picking her up after school instead of having her take the bus." The secretary's tone shifted, becoming more concerned. "Would you like me to make a note that she's only to be released to you?" "Yes, please. And if anyone else asks about her or tries to pick her up, please call me immediately." Sarah drove home with shaking hands, checking her rearview mirror constantly. Every car seemed suspicious, every pedestrian a potential threat. She parked in her driveway and sat for several minutes, scanning the neighborhood for any sign of the mysterious watcher. That afternoon, she waited in the school pickup line 30 minutes early, studying every face and vehicle around her. When Emma climbed into the car, chattering about her day, Sarah tried to keep her voice casual. "Honey, I think we should talk about stranger safety again." Emma's face grew serious. "Is this about the man at the bus stop?" "Partly. Have you seen him again?" "Yesterday. He was parked near the playground during recess. Mrs. Patterson noticed him too. She made us all come inside early." Sarah's blood ran cold. The school had noticed too. This wasn't her imagination or paranoia. Someone was actively watching her daughter, and they were bold enough to do it in public places. That evening, Sarah called her neighbor, Janet, the mother of Emma's new friend. Janet had lived on the street for 15 years and might know if there had been similar incidents before. "Oh, honey," Janet said when Sarah explained the situation, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You should know about the Hendersons." "The Hendersons?" "The family who lived in your house before you. They moved out suddenly last winter, middle of the night almost. Linda Henderson was my book club partner, and she stopped coming to meetings, stopped answering her phone. Then one day, there was a moving truck, and they were gone." Sarah's grip tightened on the phone. "Did they say why they left?" "No, but Linda seemed scared the last few times I saw her. She mentioned getting strange letters, feeling like someone was watching their house. Her kids were having nightmares. The youngest, a little girl about Emma's age, refused to walk to school alone. The similarities were too close to ignore. Sarah asked Janet if she'd noticed anyone suspicious in the neighborhood recently. "There's been a man in different cars parked on various streets. Never the same car twice, but always him. Dark hair, sunglasses, like Emma described. I've seen him maybe 4 or 5 times over the past few weeks. I thought he might be a private investigator or something." After hanging up, Sarah double-checked every lock in the house and closed all the curtains. She found herself moving from window to window, peering through small gaps to scan the street outside. The winter darkness came early, and with it, a sense of being completely exposed. At midnight, she was awakened by a sound outside. A car door slamming, perhaps, or footsteps on the sidewalk. She crept to Emma's room and found her daughter sleeping peacefully, then moved to the front window. Under the streetlight, she could see fresh footprints in the snow leading from the sidewalk to her front porch and back again. Someone had been on her property while they slept. Sarah spent the rest of the night awake, sitting in the living room with her phone in her hand and a kitchen knife on the table beside her. She called the police again in the morning, and this time they agreed to send an officer to take a report. Officer Martinez was young and thorough, photographing the footprints before they melted and taking copies of both letters. He promised increased patrols in the neighborhood, but warned Sarah that unless the letters contained direct threats, their options were limited. "I'd recommend security cameras," he suggested, "and maybe changing up your routines. Don't leave or arrive at the same times every day." As he drove away, Sarah noticed the elderly woman across the street watching from her window again. This time, instead of disappearing, the woman raised her hand and gestured for Sarah to come over. With trepidation, Sarah walked across the street and knocked on the front door. Chapter 3. The Witness. The woman who answered the door was older than Sarah had expected, probably in her 70s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and sharp blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore a faded floral housecoat and held a cup of tea in trembling hands. "Mrs. Chen, isn't it? I'm Dorothy Finch. I've been wanting to speak with you." Her voice was surprisingly strong despite her frail appearance. "Please, come in. We need to talk about your situation." Dorothy's living room was a time capsule from the 1970s, with avocado green carpet and wood-paneled walls covered in family photographs. She gestured for Sarah to sit on a floral sofa while she settled into a worn recliner positioned perfectly to view the street. "I've been living on this street for 43 years, Dorothy began, setting down her teacup with a slight rattle. "I've seen families come and go, watched children grow up, witnessed the neighborhood change, but nothing like what's been happening to that house of yours." Sarah leaned forward. "You know about the letters?" "Oh, honey, it's more than letters. It started with the Morrison family back in 2018. Lovely couple with twin boys. They lasted 8 months before they moved out in the middle of the night. Then came the Patels, such a sweet family with a teenage daughter. They managed 6 months. The Hendersons after them barely made it 4 months." Dorothy stood and walked to a drawer, pulling out a manila folder thick with papers. "I've been keeping records. License plates, descriptions, dates, times. The police wouldn't listen to me, said I was just a nosy old lady with too much time on my hands." She opened the folder, revealing pages of handwritten notes, photocopied letters, and even some blurry photographs taken from her window. "He changes cars regularly. Sometimes it's a blue sedan, sometimes a black SUV, occasionally a white pickup truck. But it's always the same man. Mid-40s, dark hair, usually wearing sunglasses even on cloudy days. He has a scar on his left hand. I saw it once when he was putting something under the Hendersons' door." Sarah's hands shook as she looked through the documentation. Dorothy had been methodically tracking the Watcher for years, creating a comprehensive file that law enforcement had dismissed. "Do you know who he is?" Dorothy's expression darkened. "I have my suspicions. There's a man named Marcus Kellerman who used to live in this neighborhood 20 years ago. His family owned the house where the Patels lived. He was troubled. There were incidents when he was a teenager. Peeping in windows, following young girls home from school, his parents sent him away to some kind of facility." She pulled out a yellowed newspaper clipping from 2003. The headline read, "Local teen charged with stalking harassment." The grainy photo showed a young man with dark hair being led away in handcuffs. His parents sold the house and moved away shortly after this. "But I think he's come back. I think he's obsessed with the idea that this neighborhood belongs to him somehow. The families he targets all fit a pattern: single mothers with young daughters, or families with girls between the ages of 8 and 12. Sarah felt sick. Emma was exactly 10 years old. "Why haven't you gone to the police with all this?" "I have, multiple times. They took a report after the Henderson incident, but nothing came of it. Marcus Kellerman doesn't officially exist anymore. No current address, no employment records, no active driver's license. He's become a ghost." Dorothy moved to her window and pointed across the street. "But ghosts leave traces. I've seen him watching your house at night. He parks 2 streets over and walks through the backyards. He knows exactly which houses have dogs, which have security systems, where the blind spots are." "How do you see all this?" The old woman smiled grimly. "Insomnia has its advantages. I've been keeping watch since the Morrison family left. Someone has to protect the children." As if summoned by their conversation, Dorothy's expression suddenly changed. She grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her away from the window. "He's here," she whispered. Sarah's heart pounded as Dorothy carefully moved the curtain aside just enough to peek out. Across the street, a man in a dark jacket stood on the sidewalk in front of Sarah's house, looking up at the windows. Even from a distance, Sarah could see he was taking photographs with his phone. "Call 911, Dorothy hissed, but by the time Sarah had dialed the number, the man was gone, disappearing between 2 houses like smoke. The police arrived 20 minutes later, the same Officer Martinez who had taken the report that morning. He listened to both women's accounts, but seemed skeptical about Dorothy's extensive documentation. "Mrs. Finch, We appreciate your vigilance, but most of this is circumstantial. We can't arrest someone based on old newspaper clippings and speculation." "Then what can you do?" Sarah demanded. "We'll increase patrols like I promised, and I'll run the name Marcus Kellerman through our system, see if anything comes up. But without concrete evidence of current criminal activity, our hands are tied." After the officer left, Dorothy walked Sarah back across the street, her folder tucked under her arm. "Don't rely on them to protect you," she said quietly. "They didn't protect the other families, and they won't protect you. But I will. I'll keep watching, keep documenting, and I'll call you if I see anything." She pressed a piece of paper into Sarah's hand with her phone number written in careful script. "Lock your doors, close your curtains, and vary your routines. Don't let Emma out of your sight. And whatever you do, don't let him know that you know he's watching. Predators like him escalate when they feel cornered." That night, Sarah installed motion sensor lights around her house and ordered a security camera system online. She also called her sister in California, asking if she and Emma could visit for a few weeks. "Is everything okay?" her sister asked. Sarah looked out her bedroom window at Dorothy's house, where a single light glowed in the front room like a sentinel's beacon. "I'm not sure," she admitted, "but I think we might need to leave." As she spoke, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I saw you talking to the old woman. She can't protect you. No one can. Sweet dreams, Sarah." Chapter 4: Escalation. Sarah didn't sleep after receiving the text message. She sat in her living room chair, clutching her phone and checking the newly installed motion lights every few minutes. At 3:17 a.m., the front yard light blazed on, illuminating nothing but an empty lawn and the skeletal branches of her oak tree swaying in the wind. 5 minutes later, it happened again, then again at 3:31 a.m. By dawn, Sarah had convinced herself it was just a malfunction, but when she stepped outside to check the mail, she found fresh cigarette butts scattered on her front lawn. Someone had been standing there for hours, smoking and watching her house while she sat awake inside. The security cameras she'd ordered wouldn't arrive for another 2 days. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like a mouse being toyed with by a cat that could strike at any moment. Emma noticed her mother's distress at breakfast. "Mom, you look terrible. Did you sleep at all?" "Just having trouble adjusting to the new house," Sarah lied, forcing a smile while checking her phone for the third time in 5 minutes. The unknown number hadn't texted again, but somehow that felt worse than continued contact. At the school drop-off, Sarah walked Emma directly to her classroom instead of leaving her at the main entrance. She spoke quietly with Emma's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, explaining that there had been some safety concerns and asking her to be especially vigilant. "Has someone been bothering Emma?" Mrs. Patterson asked, her expression growing serious. "Not directly, but there's been a man watching the school. The police are aware, but I'd feel better if you kept her close during recess and made sure she doesn't leave with anyone but me." The teacher nodded grimly. "We've actually had reports from other parents about a suspicious man in the area. I'll alert the principal and make sure all staff are aware." On her way home, Sarah noticed the same blue sedan she'd seen in Dorothy's photographs parked at the end of her street. The driver was reading a newspaper, but she could see his eyes tracking her car in the side mirror. She drove past her house and circled the block, watching as the sedan started up and followed her at a distance. Her hands gripped the steering wheel as she made random turns through the neighborhood, testing whether she was being followed. The blue sedan stayed with her for 6 blocks before disappearing down a side street. When Sarah finally returned home, her heart was pounding so hard she could barely get her key in the lock. Dorothy called an hour later. "He's getting bolder. I saw him on your property again last night. This time he tried your back door." Sarah's blood ran cold. "What?" "Around midnight. He walked right up to your back porch and tried the handle. When it didn't open, he stood there for several minutes, looking in your windows. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone." "Why didn't you call me?" "I didn't want to frighten you while you were alone in the house with Emma. But Sarah, this is escalating. He's testing your defenses, looking for ways in. You need to consider leaving." That afternoon, Sarah called her workplace and requested emergency leave. She couldn't concentrate on her job while Emma was at school and her house was being watched. Her supervisor was understanding, especially when Sarah mentioned she was dealing with a stalking situation. "Take all the time you need," her boss said. "Your safety and your daughter's safety come first." The security cameras arrived earlier than expected. Sarah spent the afternoon installing them around the perimeter of her house, her hands shaking as she worked. She positioned one camera to watch the front door, another covering the backyard, and a third monitoring the driveway. The system connected to her phone, sending alerts whenever motion was detected. At 4:30 p.m., while picking up Emma from school, Sarah received the first alert. She opened the app to see a figure in dark clothing standing in her backyard in broad daylight, looking directly into her kitchen window. The person's face was obscured by a hood, but the body language was unmistakably predatory, confident, entitled, unafraid. Sarah called 911 immediately, but by the time officers arrived 15 minutes later, the intruder was gone. The police reviewed the camera footage, but the image quality wasn't good enough to make a positive identification. "This is definitely criminal trespass," Officer Martinez admitted. "We'll increase patrols and add your address to our priority response list." "But Mrs. Chen, I have to be honest with you. This person knows your schedule, knows when you're not home. That suggests they've been watching you for a while." That evening, Sarah made the decision she'd been avoiding. She called her sister in California. "Lisa, I need to ask a huge favor. Can Emma and I come stay with you for a few weeks? Maybe longer?" Her sister didn't hesitate. "Of course. What's going on?" Sarah explained the situation as Emma played in her room, unaware that their lives were about to change again. Lisa listened without interruption, then spoke with the kind of protective fury that only sisters possess. "Pack tonight. I'm booking you flights for tomorrow morning. Don't tell anyone you're leaving, and don't go back to that house alone." As Sarah began quietly packing their essentials, her phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. "Running away won't solve anything, Sarah. I know where you work, where Emma goes to school, where your sister lives in San Diego. There's nowhere you can hide from someone who truly cares about you." The message included a photograph taken through Sarah's kitchen window that very afternoon, a picture of her packing suitcases. Sarah's hands trembled as she called Dorothy. "He was in my house, or close enough to see through my windows while I was packing. He knows we're leaving." "Get out tonight," Dorothy urged. "Don't wait until morning. Take Emma and go to a hotel, then catch the earliest flight you can. I'll watch the house and let you know when it's safe to arrange for movers." Sarah looked at her half-packed suitcases, then at Emma's bedroom where her daughter was innocently arranging her stuffed animals. She thought about the Hendersons, the Patels, the Morrison family, all driven from their homes by this phantom who seemed to know everything about their lives. As she zipped up their suitcases, Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed her home phone number, but she was standing in her living room. Someone was calling her from inside her own house. She grabbed Emma and their bags, and they ran. Chapter 5, Flight. Sarah's hands shook as she threw their suitcases into the back of her car, Emma standing beside her in confusion and growing fear. The house phone was still ringing inside, each shrill tone like a countdown to something terrible. "Mom, what's happening? Why are we leaving so fast?" "We're going to visit Aunt Lisa earlier than planned," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady while scanning the dark street for any sign of movement. "It's going to be an adventure." As they pulled out of the driveway, Sarah's cell phone buzzed with a text. "Leaving so soon? The night is young, and we have so much to discuss." Sarah turned off her phone completely and drove toward the highway, taking a circuitous route through neighborhoods she barely knew. In the rearview mirror, she thought she saw headlights following them, but every time she turned, the lights disappeared. They spent the night at a chain hotel near the airport, paying cash and registering under her maiden name. Sarah barely slept, checking the door locks every hour and peering through the curtains at the parking lot below. Emma curled up next to her mother, sensing the danger even if she didn't understand it. At 5 a.m., Sarah's phone buzzed with a new message, even though she'd turned it off. "Sweet dreams in room 247. The view from the parking lot is lovely." Sarah's blood froze. She crept to the window and saw a figure standing beside a car 3 rows away, looking directly up at their room. Even in the dim light, she could make out the familiar silhouette. "Emma, get dressed. We're leaving now." They grabbed their bags and took the stairs instead of the elevator, exiting through the hotel's back entrance. Sarah's car was still in the front parking lot, but she didn't dare retrieve it. Instead, she called a taxi from the hotel lobby phone, asking to be taken to the airport immediately. During the 40-minute ride, Sarah used the driver's phone to call her sister, explaining they were coming earlier than expected. Lisa had already booked their flights and would meet them at San Diego International. "Sarah, you sound terrified. What aren't you telling me?" "I think he's following us. He knew what hotel room we were in. I don't know how he could know that, unless—" Sarah's voice trailed off as a horrible thought occurred to her. "Unless he's tracking us somehow." At the airport, Sarah bought Emma new clothes from a gift shop and made her change in the bathroom, leaving their original clothes in the trash. She also bought a new phone with cash, leaving her old phone in an airport locker. If he was tracking them electronically, she was going to make it as difficult as possible. The flight to San Diego felt like the longest 3 hours of Sarah's life. Every passenger seemed suspicious, every flight attendant a potential threat. Emma slept fitfully against her shoulder, while Sarah watched the aisle for any sign of the dark-haired man from Dorothy's photographs. Lisa was waiting at baggage claim, her face creased with worry. She'd always been the practical sister, the one who handled crises with efficiency and determination. She took one look at Sarah's exhausted face and Emma's frightened eyes and immediately understood the gravity of the situation. "My car's in short-term parking. We'll go straight to my house, and then you're going to tell me everything." Lisa lived in a quiet suburb of San Diego, in a modest ranch home with a fenced backyard and good neighbors. It felt like sanctuary after the terror of the past few days. Emma perked up at the sight of her aunt's golden retriever, Max, and for the first time in days, Sarah felt like she could breathe. That evening, after Emma had fallen asleep on the couch with Max at her feet, the sisters sat in Lisa's kitchen over coffee, and Sarah told her everything. Lisa listened without interruption, her expression growing darker with each detail. "You need to file a restraining order," Lisa said when Sarah finished. "And we need to contact the FBI. This person has crossed state lines, and if he's been doing this to multiple families, it's a pattern of federal crimes. But we don't even know his real name. Dorothy thinks it's Marcus Kellerman, but the police said he doesn't exist anymore. Then we make him exist. I have a friend who works in cybersecurity. If this guy is tracking you electronically, she can help us figure out how. And if he's been watching families for years, there has to be digital evidence somewhere." Sarah felt hopeful for the first time in days. Lisa had always been a problem solver, and having her support made the situation feel manageable instead of overwhelming. But their sense of security was shattered the next morning when Lisa found a manila envelope slipped under her front door. Inside were photographs of Sarah and Emma at the airport, on the plane, and walking through Lisa's neighborhood the day before. The accompanying note was brief. "Distance is just an illusion, Sarah. I'll always find you." Lisa called the San Diego Police Department immediately, and this time the response was different. Detective Rosa Martinez, no relation to Officer Martinez back home, took the threat seriously, especially when she learned about the pattern of harassment spanning multiple states. "This looks like organized stalking," Detective Martinez explained. "The level of surveillance and the ability to track you across state lines suggests someone with resources and technical skills. We're going to treat this as a credible threat." She arranged for increased patrols around Lisa's neighborhood and connected them with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. Sarah provided copies of all the letters, photographs, and Dorothy's documentation. "The good news is that he's making mistakes," Detective Martinez said. "Following you to California means he's committed federal crimes, and these photographs show he was at the airport. There are security cameras everywhere. We'll have him on video." That afternoon, while Emma played in the backyard under Lisa's watchful eye, Sarah called Dorothy to check on the house. The old woman's voice was tense. "He's been back every night since you left. Last night, he broke a window in your basement. The police came, but of course, he was gone by then. Sarah, I think he's living in your house now." The violation felt complete. Not only had he driven them from their home, but now he was occupying it like some kind of parasitic entity. Sarah realized with growing horror that running away hadn't solved anything. It had only changed the location of the threat. That night, as Sarah sat in Lisa's guest room, listening to Emma's peaceful breathing, her new phone buzzed with a message from another unknown number. "I hope you're enjoying your sister's hospitality. Emma looks so happy playing with that dog. It would be a shame if something happened to disrupt this perfect family scene." Through the bedroom window, Sarah could see a figure standing across the street, barely visible in the shadows between streetlights. He'd found them again, and this time he was threatening not just her and Emma, but Lisa too. Chapter 6. The Hunt. Lisa's cybersecurity friend, Maya Patel, arrived at the house the next morning with a laptop bag full of equipment and a grim expression that matched the seriousness of their situation. She was a small woman with intelligent dark eyes and the kind of focused intensity that made Sarah feel like help had finally arrived. "Show me everything," Maya said, setting up her laptop on Lisa's dining room table. "Every device you've used, every account you've accessed, every photo you've taken. If this guy is tracking you digitally, we'll find out how." Sarah handed over her old phone, which she'd retrieved from the airport locker the day before. Maya connected it to her laptop and began running diagnostic software, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Here we go," Maya said after 20 minutes of tense silence. "You've got spyware installed. Professional-grade stuff, not something you'd pick up from a sketchy website. This is military or law enforcement-level surveillance software." "How did it get on my phone?" "Could be a few ways. Physical access to your device, malicious link in an email or text, or—" Maya paused, frowning at her screen. "Or it was installed before you even bought the phone. What's your carrier?" "Verizon. I got the phone from their store in the mall." Maya's expression darkened. "Sarah, this software was installed at the factory level. Someone intercepted your phone during shipping or had access to it at the retail location. This isn't random stalking. This is targeted surveillance by someone with serious resources and connections." Lisa leaned over Maya's shoulder, studying the screen. "What kind of connections?" "The kind that can access shipping manifests, retail inventory systems, maybe even cellular network infrastructure. We're not dealing with some obsessed neighbor anymore. This is organized, possibly professional." While Maya worked on tracing the spyware, Sarah called Detective Martinez with the new information. The detective's tone became more urgent when she heard about the sophisticated surveillance. "We're escalating this to the FBI's Cyber Crimes Division," Martinez said. "This level of stalking suggests organized criminal activity, possibly human trafficking reconnaissance or corporate espionage. How much do you know about your ex-husband's business?" Sarah's stomach dropped. "David works in defense contracting. He has government security clearance, but we've been divorced for 2 years, and our relationship is cordial. He wouldn't. We need to explore every angle. Can you give me his contact information?" After hanging up, Sarah realized how little she actually knew about David's current work. Their marriage had ended amicably enough, but he'd always been secretive about his job, claiming it was classified. She'd assumed it was typical government contractor work, but what if there was more to it? Maya looked up from her laptop. "I've got good news and bad news. The good news is I can trace some of the surveillance back to its source. The bad news is that source is a server farm in Eastern Europe, routed through about 12 proxy servers. Whoever is doing this has significant technical expertise. But you can stop it? I can clean your devices and set up counter-surveillance measures. But Sarah, if they had access to install this software in the first place, they can probably do it again. We need to think about this differently." Lisa had been quiet during the technical discussion, but now she spoke up. "What if we turn the tables? Instead of running from this person, what if we hunt them?" Maya's eyes lit up. "That's actually not a bad idea. The spyware goes both ways. While they're watching you, I can potentially trace the signal back to them. It's risky, but no," Sarah said immediately. "I won't put Emma in danger." "Emma doesn't have to be involved. Lisa said. She can stay here with me while you and Maya set a trap. Use yourself as bait to draw this person out. The idea terrified Sarah, but she was exhausted from running and constantly looking over her shoulder. Maybe it was time to take control of the situation instead of just reacting to it. That afternoon, Maya set up a sophisticated plan. She cleaned Sarah's devices of spyware, but left traces that would suggest the removal was incomplete. Then, she installed her own tracking software, designed to monitor anyone who tried to access Sarah's digital footprint. "We'll make it look like you're planning to go back to your house," Maya explained. "Book a flight, make hotel reservations, send some emails about packing up your belongings. If he's monitoring your communications, he'll know you're coming." Detective Martinez coordinated with local law enforcement back home, arranging for undercover officers to watch Sarah's house. Dorothy agreed to be their eyes on the ground, monitoring the situation from her window. The plan was set in motion that evening. Sarah booked a flight back home for the following week and sent carefully crafted emails to friends about retrieving her belongings. Maya monitored all digital communications, waiting for signs that someone was intercepting them. At 11 p.m., Maya's equipment detected unauthorized access to Sarah's email account from an IP address in the same city as her house. Someone was reading her messages in real time. "He's taking the bait," Maya said, her voice tense with excitement, "and I'm tracking him back." But their moment of victory was short-lived. At 11:30 p.m., Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed Dorothy's number, but when Sarah answered, she heard Dorothy's voice, panicked and afraid. "Sarah, don't come back. He knows about the trap. He's here in my house." The line went dead. Sarah tried calling back, but the phone went straight to voicemail. She called the police, but the dispatcher said units were already en route. Neighbors had reported screaming from Dorothy's address. Maya frantically worked her laptop, trying to maintain the digital trail while Sarah paced the room in terror. Their plan had backfired. Instead of catching the stalker, they'd put Dorothy in danger. "I've got him," Maya said suddenly. "The signal is coming from Dorothy's house. He's using her internet connection to monitor your communications." Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your elderly friend should mind her own business. She's been watching me for years, but now I'm watching her. Come home, Sarah. Come home, or she pays the price for your games." The message included a photograph taken from inside Dorothy's living room, showing the old woman tied to her chair with duct tape over her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. Sarah was already reaching for her keys when Lisa grabbed her arm. "You can't go back there. It's exactly what he wants. I can't let him hurt Dorothy because of me. She's been trying to protect us, and now she's going to die because I was too much of a coward to face this myself." Maya looked up from her laptop, her face pale. "There's something else. I managed to trace the original spyware installation back further. Sarah, the order for your phone was placed by someone using your ex-husband's credit card." The room fell silent, except for the sound of Sarah's ragged breathing. Either David was involved in this nightmare, or someone with access to his financial information was using him to get to her. As Sarah stared at her sister's frightened face and thought about Dorothy tied up in her living room, she realized that running away had solved nothing. The only way this would end was if she went back and faced whatever was waiting for her in that house on Boulevard Street. "Book me a flight for tonight," she told Maya. "It's time to end this." Chapter 7: The Return. The red-eye flight back home was turbulent, matching Sarah's churning emotions as she stared out at the darkness below. Maya had insisted on coming with her, bringing a duffel bag full of surveillance equipment and a grim determination to see this through. Detective Martinez had coordinated with the FBI, but Sarah knew that by the time law enforcement mobilized, Dorothy might already be dead. She'd left Emma with Lisa, enduring her daughter's tears and desperate pleas not to go. The hardest part was not being able to promise she'd come back safely. But she couldn't live with Dorothy's blood on her hands, and she couldn't keep running forever with Emma living in constant fear. They landed at 5:47 a.m., the winter sky still dark and threatening snow. Maya had arranged for a rental car, paying cash and using fake identification that made Sarah wonder exactly what kind of cybersecurity work her friend really did. The FBI is setting up a command post 2 blocks from your house, Maya explained as they drove through the empty streets. Detective Martinez will be coordinating with local SWAT, but they're treating this as a hostage situation now. They can't move until they know Dorothy's safe. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message. Welcome home. I've been waiting for you. Come to 657 Boulevard. Come alone, or your friend dies slowly. The message was followed by a video that made Sarah's blood run cold. Dorothy was still tied to her chair, but now there were cuts on her arms and her face was bruised. A man's voice, electronically distorted, spoke from behind the camera. Every minute you delay, she suffers more. I have to go in, Sarah said. Not alone, Maya replied, pulling into a parking spot 3 blocks from Boulevard Street. I'm going to set up surveillance from Dorothy's house. I can see your front door from her window. The FBI will be monitoring everything through body cameras and audio feeds. Agent Rebecca Torres met them at the FBI command post, a mobile unit disguised as a cable repair van. She was a small, intense woman with the kind of focused energy that inspired confidence. Mrs. Chen, I understand your urgency, but we need to approach this tactically. We believe the suspect is Marcus Kellerman, age 43, former military intelligence with specialized training in surveillance and psychological warfare. He was dishonorably discharged 8 years ago for unauthorized surveillance of fellow soldiers. She showed Sarah a photograph of a man with dark hair and cold eyes, the same face from the old newspaper clipping Dorothy had shown her, but aged and harder. After his discharge, he worked for several private security firms before disappearing completely. We think he's been living off the grid, obsessed with this neighborhood because of childhood trauma. His family was evicted from their home here when he was 12, and he's been trying to reclaim it ever since. What about my ex-husband? His credit card was used to buy my phone. Agent Torres's expression darkened. David Chen has been under surveillance by the Defense Department for the past 6 months. They suspect he's been selling classified information to foreign contractors. Kellerman may have been hired to monitor you as leverage against your ex-husband, but he's clearly become personally obsessed. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. David's betrayal had put her and Emma in danger, but it had also unleashed something far worse. A damaged man with military training and a psychotic fixation on their neighborhood. We need to get Dorothy out alive, Sarah said. What's the plan? Agent Torres outlined the strategy. Sarah would approach the house wearing a wire and hidden cameras. SWAT teams would be positioned around the perimeter, ready to move the moment Dorothy was secured. Maya would coordinate electronic surveillance from Dorothy's house, using her equipment to jam any communications Kellerman might have with outside accomplices. At 8:30 a.m., Sarah walked slowly up the familiar sidewalk towards 657 Boulevard. The house looked different now, windows covered with newspaper, the front yard littered with debris. A makeshift antenna had been installed on the roof, probably to boost Kellerman's surveillance capabilities. The front door opened before she could knock. Marcus Kellerman stood in the doorway, and seeing him in person was more terrifying than any photograph. He was tall and lean, with the kind of controlled stillness that suggested coiled violence. His eyes were flat and emotionless, like a predator studying prey. Sarah, you look tired. The cross-country travel must have been exhausting. His voice was soft, almost conversational, which made it more unsettling than if he'd been screaming threats. Where's Dorothy? Safe, for now. Come in. We have so much to discuss. Sarah stepped into her own home and barely recognized it. Kellerman had covered every window with blackout paper and filled the rooms with surveillance equipment. Monitors showed views of the entire neighborhood, and Sarah realized with horror that he'd been watching not just her house, but every family on the street. Impressive, isn't it? I've been protecting this neighborhood for years, making sure only the right families live here. The Morrisons weren't suitable. Too many parties, too much noise. The Patels were acceptable, but they didn't appreciate the security I provided. The Hendersons were almost perfect, but the mother was too paranoid. He led her into the living room, where Dorothy sat tied to a chair. The elderly woman was conscious but clearly injured, her eyes tracking Sarah's movement with desperate hope. And then you arrived, Kellerman continued, settling into Sarah's own armchair, as if he belonged there. A single mother with a beautiful daughter, just like my own family before they were forced to leave. You were perfect, Sarah. You could have been so happy here if you just accepted my protection. Protection? You terrorized us. You drove us from our home. Kellerman's expression shifted, showing the first hint of emotion, a flash of anger that revealed the instability beneath his calm facade. I was protecting you. Do you have any idea how dangerous this world is for women like you? Your ex-husband sold government secrets to foreign agents. There are people who would have used you and Emma to get to him. I kept you safe from all of that. By stalking us? By threatening my daughter? By watching over you? By being the guardian this neighborhood needed? He leaned forward, his voice becoming more agitated. But you couldn't appreciate what I was doing. You had to involve the police, the FBI, that interfering old woman. You forced me to escalate. Through her hidden microphone, Sarah heard Agent Torres's voice in her earpiece. Keep him talking. We're moving into position. Sarah looked at Dorothy, trying to communicate reassurance with her eyes. The old woman was pale but alert, and Sarah noticed that the ropes around her hands looked looser than they had in the video. You're right, Sarah said, forcing herself to sound calmer. I didn't understand what you were trying to do. Maybe we can work something out. You let Dorothy go, and we can discuss how to make this neighborhood safe for everyone. Kellerman studied her face, and for a moment, Sarah thought he might actually believe her. But then his expression hardened again. You're lying. I can see it in your eyes. You're just like all the others, ungrateful, suspicious, unable to recognize protection when it's offered. He stood up, pulling a knife from his belt. I gave you every chance to accept my guardianship willingly. Now you'll have to learn the hard way. As he moved toward Dorothy with the knife raised, Sarah heard Agent Torres's voice in her earpiece. Go, go, go! The front door exploded inward as the SWAT team breached the house. Kellerman spun toward the sound, giving Dorothy the chance she'd been waiting for. The old woman had been working at her bonds throughout the conversation, and now she rolled her chair backward, away from the knife. Sarah lunged forward, grabbing Kellerman's arm and trying to wrestle the weapon away from him. He was stronger than she'd expected, but years of military training had also taught him to react predictably to certain attacks. As they struggled, Sarah remembered the self-defense classes she'd taken after her divorce and drove her knee upward as hard as she could. Kellerman doubled over with a grunt of pain, and Sarah managed to kick the knife away as SWAT officers flooded into the room. Within seconds, he was on the ground with 3 officers restraining him, still screaming about protecting the neighborhood and ungrateful families. As paramedics checked Dorothy's injuries and FBI agents secured the scene, Sarah sat on her front porch steps, shaking with adrenaline and relief. Maya emerged from Dorothy's house across the street, grinning and holding up her laptop. We got everything, she called out. All his communications, his surveillance network, evidence of other families he's been watching. This guy's going away forever. Agent Torres approached with an update. We found evidence linking Kellerman to at least 12 other stalking cases across 4 states. And we've arrested your ex-husband. He's been selling classified defense contracts to a foreign intelligence service. Kellerman was originally hired to watch you as leverage, but he became obsessed and went rogue. Sarah looked at her house, wondering if she could ever feel safe there again. The walls that had once promised sanctuary now felt contaminated by Kellerman's presence. What happens now? She asked. Now you get your life back, Agent Torres said, and Kellerman gets to spend the rest of his life in federal prison where he won't be watching anyone ever again. Chapter 8. Reclaimed. 6 months after Marcus Kellerman's arrest, Sarah stood in her front yard watching Emma ride her bike down Boulevard Street with 3 neighborhood children trailing behind her. The sound of their laughter carried on the spring breeze, a stark contrast to the oppressive silence that had once filled these same streets. The house looked different now. Sarah had hired contractors to replace every window, repaint the exterior, and remove all traces of Kellerman's occupation. The surveillance equipment was gone, the blackout paper had been stripped away, and sunlight once again filled the rooms that had become his twisted command center. Dorothy sat on her porch across the street, fully recovered from her injuries and more vigilant than ever. But now her watchfulness felt protective rather than paranoid. She'd become something of a neighborhood celebrity, featured in news articles about her role in capturing the boulevard stalker. More importantly, she'd become like a grandmother to Emma, who visited her every day after school. "Sarah," Dorothy called out, waving a manila folder. "The mail came." Sarah crossed the street, knowing what the folder contained. The trial was set to begin next month, and the prosecution had been keeping her updated on the evidence they'd compiled. What they'd discovered about Kellerman's activities was even more extensive than anyone had initially realized. 12 families, Dorothy said, settling into her porch swing and opening the folder. 12 families across 4 states, all driven from their homes by that monster. Some of them are coming to testify at the trial. Sarah had spoken with several of Kellerman's other victims over the past few months. Their stories were hauntingly similar. The letters, the surveillance, the gradual escalation of psychological terror until families fled in desperation. Some had never recovered financially from abandoning their homes. Others had divorced under the stress, unable to cope with the constant fear. "Any word on the sentencing recommendation?" Sarah asked. "Life without parole," Dorothy replied with satisfaction. "Agent Torres says they have enough evidence to put him away forever. Stalking, kidnapping, interstate terrorism, weapons charges, he'll never see the outside of a federal prison." The revelation about David's espionage activities had been almost as shocking as Kellerman's crimes. Her ex-husband was serving 15 years in federal prison for selling classified defense contracts to Chinese intelligence agents. The money he'd made from his betrayal was now frozen in government accounts, leaving Emma's college fund intact, but ensuring David would never profit from his crimes. Emma had taken the news about her father surprisingly well, perhaps because she'd been more focused on the relief of being safe again. She'd started seeing a therapist who specialized in childhood trauma, and slowly, the nightmares and anxiety were fading. "Mom," Emma called from the street. "Can we have a sleepover this weekend?" Jenny's mom said yes. Sarah smiled and waved back. 6 months ago, the idea of Emma sleeping anywhere but in the same room as her mother would have been unthinkable. Now it felt like a milestone in their recovery. "Of course, sweetheart." That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Sarah sat in her living room with Maya, who'd driven up from the city for a visit. The two women had become close friends during the ordeal, bonded by the shared experience of fighting back against Kellerman's terror. "How are you really doing?" Maya asked, setting down her wine glass and studying Sarah's face with the direct gaze that had first impressed her. "Better," Sarah said honestly. "Some days I still check the locks twice and look over my shoulder in parking lots, but I'm not afraid to live here anymore. This is our home, and we're not letting him take that away from us." Maya had been instrumental in helping other families reclaim their digital privacy after Kellerman's arrest. The FBI had discovered that he'd been tracking dozens of people through spyware and social media monitoring, creating detailed profiles of potential victims. Maya's cybersecurity firm now specialized in helping stalking victims secure their digital lives. "I have some news," Maya said. "Remember that private security company Kellerman worked for after his military discharge? The FBI investigation found evidence that they were running illegal surveillance operations on behalf of foreign governments. 3 more executives were arrested last week." Sarah wasn't surprised. The web of corruption and criminal activity surrounding her case had continued to expand throughout the investigation. Kellerman had been just one predator in a larger ecosystem of people who profited from violating others' privacy and safety. What about the other families? Are they doing okay? Most of them are. The Hendersons moved back to their old neighborhood. Turns out they never really wanted to leave. They just couldn't afford to fight him. The Morrison family started a support group for stalking victims. And the Patels, well, they bought the house next door to yours. Sarah laughed in surprise. "Really? They're moving back? Next month." Raj Patel said they fell in love with this neighborhood before Kellerman terrorized them, and they weren't going to let him win by staying away forever. The idea of having neighbors who understood what she'd been through was oddly comforting. They could watch out for each other without the paranoia that had once defined life on Boulevard Street. As Maya prepared to leave, she handed Sarah a small device that looked like a car key fob. Personal safety alarm, Maya explained. GPS-enabled, connects directly to 911. Not that I think you'll need it, but better safe than sorry, Sarah finished, accepting the device with gratitude. After Maya left, Sarah walked through her house, turning off lights and checking locks, not from fear now, but from the normal caution of a single mother protecting her child. In Emma's room, she found her daughter fast asleep with a book about horses open on her chest and her new kitten, Courage, curled up beside her. The kitten had been Dorothy's idea, a companion to help Emma feel safer at night. The name had been Emma's choice, and Sarah thought it was perfect. Standing in the doorway, Sarah reflected on how much their lives had changed. The terror and helplessness she'd felt during those dark weeks seemed like a nightmare now, something that had happened to a different person. She'd discovered strength she didn't know she possessed, and she'd learned that running away wasn't always the answer. More importantly, she'd learned that evil could be fought and defeated when good people stood together. The next morning brought news that would close the final chapter of their ordeal. Agent Torres called to inform Sarah that Kellerman had accepted a plea bargain rather than face trial. Life in prison without the possibility of parole, Torres explained. He'll be transferred to ADX Florence, the Supermax prison in Colorado. He'll spend the rest of his life in solitary confinement with no contact with the outside world. Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. There would be no trial, no testimony, no reliving the trauma in front of cameras and strangers. It was over. That evening, the entire neighborhood gathered in Sarah's backyard for an impromptu celebration. Dorothy brought homemade cookies, the Johnsons from next door contributed a barbecue grill, and several other families brought side dishes and children's games. Even some of Kellerman's other victims drove in from neighboring states to join the gathering. As Sarah watched Emma playing tag with a group of children, while adults shared stories and laughter around picnic tables, she realized that Kellerman's greatest failure wasn't just that he'd been caught and imprisoned. His greatest failure was that he'd tried to destroy a community, and instead he'd made it stronger. The sun was setting over Boulevard Street, casting long shadows across the lawn where Emma and her friends were now catching fireflies in mason jars. Sarah stood on her porch, no longer watching for predators in the darkness, but simply enjoying the peaceful end to a perfect day. Dorothy joined her, moving slowly but steadily up the porch steps. "Penny for your thoughts," the elderly woman said. Sarah smiled, putting her arm around Dorothy's shoulders. "I was just thinking that he's probably going crazy in that cell, knowing that we're all still here, still happy, still living our lives exactly the way we want to." Dorothy chuckled. "The best revenge is living well, they say." "No," Sarah corrected, watching Emma chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. "The best revenge is living fearlessly." As the neighborhood celebration continued around them and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in months, complete and total peace. The watcher was gone, and the watched had reclaimed their lives. The house at 657 Boulevard was home again. The end.